Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining Enrique and myself in this talk. We are going to talk about KubeCF, and the title is Deep Dive with KubeCF. I hope it's going to be a good dive. And before we start, how about you introduce yourself, Enrique?
Yes, thanks. So I'm Enrique Encalada from IBM. I have been working with the Cloud Foundry community since a couple of years, mainly concentrated on all of these different efforts to containerize Cloud Foundry. Been part of the Quarks team, worked together with the KubeCF team. Besides contributing to all of these open source repositories, I also try to adopt that inside the company for our own products, and I think that's basically me.
Cool. And I am Thulio Ferraz Assis. I'm a software engineer at SUSE, part of the Cloud Application Platform. I bootstrapped KubeCF more than 1 year ago, and since then I've become one of the most active contributors of it. And I am going to start by telling you guys how to install KubeCF locally with a minimal configuration, and bear with me, this is the same way that you would install for production with slightly different configurations. So let's take a quick look. First, we create a kind cluster, calling the kind create cluster. You give it a name. In my case, I gave it also a kubeconfig path, and then you obtain a KubeCF release bundle from the KubeCF repository. In my case, it was 2.2.2, and you have to download this file, specifically the bundle. And then if you extract the bundle, you will see that there are two files. One is the CF operator, and then the other is the KubeCF release. Those are the charts that we are going to install. So let's point the kubeconfig to the one that I used in the kind creation, and then we create the Quarks operator namespace, and we install the Quarks operator in the namespace that we just created using the chart that we extracted from the bundle, and then we set it to watch the namespace KubeCF, because it's where we are going to install KubeCF. And then we wait for it to be ready, and we install KubeCF. But first, let's take a look onto the values.wamo file for KubeCF. First, here I'm passing a cfadmin password, so it makes it easy to log in as admin with the cfcli later. And then we specify external IPs for the router and SSH proxy. And those IP addresses you can obtain from the KubeCF control plane. Note, if you get the values as WAMO, you will see it under status addresses of the type internal IP. And this IP is accessible from the host network, so you can use that one, and you specify it using in your system domain using NIP or XIP or something else from your preference. And then features, we disable the ones that we can disable. There are autoscaler, CredHub, and routing API. And then we call helm install kubecf in the namespace that we specify on the CF operator using the values that I just showed you guys, and the chart that we extracted from the bundle. You will notice that database and the IG, which stands for instance group, come up first, and after a few minutes you will get a running kubecf installation locally. After that, you can point your CF CLI to the API dot system domain that we specified on the values.wamo, and then log in with the user admin using the password that we also specified in the values.wamo file.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Tulio, for the nice explanation on KubeCF and all of the details around it. What I would like to do now is continue speaking about KubeCF, but with a very different use case. And this use case is about migration. So one of the questions that I think is really valid is, to question, when can I migrate my applications that I have on a BOSH CF into a different stack, something like Kubernetes, and this is where you actually can use KubeCF. What I would like to show today is this experiment that I did where I actually have a BOSH CF connected to two external services, in this case a database and a blob store. And then I push some applications, create some orgs, some spaces, and then I decide to shut down that BOSH CF. And this is because I want to move that workload into KubeCF. So when I shut down that BOSH CF, what I do is like I deploy KubeCF on my Kubernetes cluster, and of course connect that KubeCF to those services. And as soon as that KubeCF deployment is finished and I go on CF login, I should be able to see the applications that I previously generate on my BOSH CF. And I think this experiment will have a lot of value. Probably a lot of enterprises, customers would like to have something like this, and this is just one way on how to achieve that such a migration. So my BOSH CF consists of 11 VMs. My KubeCF consists of 4 nodes. The first thing is let's speak about my initial BOSH CF. I decided to take a Cloud Foundry deployment version 1236. I took out some of the components like the routing API, the CRED hub. I just wanted to have a small footprint. And the version is, I will explain why I choose the 1236. The next thing is like the experiment, or the way to prove that the experiment worked was for me to generate 3 organizations, Team A, Team B, Team C. Under the dev space on each of these organizations, I basically push applications, and I try to highlight the applications ID here to the left, because eventually this should serve as a way to prove that the applications that I see on my KubeCF match these applications. The next thing, was I want to show at the time that my BOSH CF was running. Of course, I cannot do that now with my command line because my BOSH CF is not working, it's stopped because the KubeCF is running now. But at that time, I was listing, my applications, my different organizations, and the UID of each application. If I move forward, you will see that I do the same for all the different orgs. Then I just list the organizations, I list them here, and I eventually list my BOSH CF deployment, and you will see that my machines are up and running. The next thing, as I said before, I use these 2 services. I take advantage of IBM Cloud, already have the infrastructure there, so why not to take those services that I need, also from the same catalog. So I use ICD and COS. One is a Postgres database, another one is object storage. So now on the flow that I tried to illustrate before, once we shut down the BOSH CF, you need to deploy a KubeCF. Now, when you deploy KubeCF, there is a lot of knowledge that one needs to build, but it helps if you are already familiar with Cloud Foundry. For me, it was a little bit of a struggle because I deal with BOSH first, then with KubeCF. But particularly with KubeCF, I was not able to manage, I was not able to deploy my KubeCF at the first time. So by debugging, I realized on different mistakes I did. And for example, here I tried to highlight one thing, that was the cloud controller. Basically, the cloud controller was not able to decrypt a particular thing. I eventually realized that for such a use case like this one, a lot of the values that you defined before for your CF configuration, you want to preserve them and use them in KubeCF. So I have a list of examples here, like the domain, encryption key, encryption keys, UADB address, buildpacks, for connection hash, and so on, and related with the different components. This made me realize that actually for this migration use case, KubeCF is really good on simplifying issues. One of the advantages of KubeCF is like KubeCF have a configuration parity with BOSH. in terms that on the same way that BOSH behaves with base manifest and the fact that you can apply ops files on top of that, you can do the same with KubeCF. You just need to do it on a different place. On KubeCF, you do that on the values YAML. And KubeCF have this really nice thing called operations inline, which is just an array of ops files definition that you can define. So I took advantage of that, of course, and I made sure that once I deploy my KubeCF, I could override particular properties that I need, that I knew I need to have same values as on my old BOSH CF. Compatible versions is yet another advantage. As I said before, I chose the version 1236. That was on purpose because I knew that KubeCF support that particular CF deployment version, and I didn't want to have a version of my BOSH CF that was not in line with the version of my KubeCF, because this is prone to a lot of incompatibility issues. Last but not least, one of the advantages is debugging. KubeCF have a really nice thing for each pod. If you go into the pod, first of all, of course, sorry for not saying that, but you can also use really nice tools like KineAS that simplify the way of navigating through the pods in a namespace. But each KubeCF pod have init containers like the wait one. So if you go to a pod that is not yet running, you can see through the init container to what other component is this pod waiting for. And then you can go to that other component or pod and see to what other component that pod is waiting. So if there is issues somewhere, you can actually easily track, go back to the root pod that is causing all of these deficiencies. So once I managed to deploy my KubeCF, and of course I was really happy at that point, I will show you what I did. The first thing was, of course, my BOSH CF was stopped. So all of those VMs were failing. Actually, it's important to do this because if you have two foundries pointing to the same database, you can get into issues. One example is like one foundry, in this case the BOSH CF, was getting the log for a particular database, while the other foundry, in this case KubeCF, was not able to get the log because the log was already given. The next thing, I can show you my KubeCF pods. All of them are running, and ideally what we want to show, of course, is that if I log in into my KubeCF CF instance, I can see what I created on my BOSH CF, which is very, very nice. So I can list my orgs. I'm already on a particular org called Team A. I can list my applications. I can list my UID of this application, and probably you want to compare that later just to make sure that it's the same UID. Can tell you that it's the same, and of course you can then just reach the endpoint of the application, and you will see that, well, you just got the same app you had before in BOSH CF, but now you have running that on Kubernetes. I think that finalized my demo. I think the migration use case is really important, and I hope this was useful for you.
Cool, thanks a lot, Enrique. And I think this is a very good starting point for the community to experiment more and more with this migration from BOSH deployments to KubeCF on Kubernetes. And now we have some time to answer some questions.